The air was still, and the sounds of all the woodland critters were absent. Benjamin was used to the animals of this forest going quiet whenever he walked between the trees, but he could usually still hear the ones that were farther away. Today there was no sound at all, save for the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. He brushed a hand over his head, toying with his pointed ear as he usually did when he expected his father to come after him. But the fat bastard was nowhere near there and was too drunk to even wake up from the old ale-stained sofa he slept on that morning. Ben shook his head to clear his mind. He didn't want his father in there. He breathed in deeply. Fresh air and the distinct smell of pine always soothed him. Honestly, he'd take the aroma of this place over blowing over some poorly built houses any day. The three pigs really didn't deserve that. He had a reputation in the kingdom as a big bad delinquent, a punk who would cause trouble for the sake of causing trouble. He would tear apart fences, intimidate folks, knock over small buildings, and get into fights in dark alleys. His father was only proud of him when he did those types of things. But what no one knew was that Ben only acted like that to keep up a tough guy image so his father wouldn't bully him. A shrill scream echoed through the forest. It sounded like a human. A child? Ben hesitated only a second before running toward the source of the sound. Ben ran past trees and dodged fallen logs and rocks. He soon found himself in front of a familiar house. He often visited this place. An old granny lived there alone. She was kind-hearted and short-sighted, which worked in Ben's favor. If she had known who her visitor actually was, or saw what he looked like, she may not have been so kind. As a matter of fact, the old lady was the only person in the kingdom who was kind to him in any degree. The scream must have come from inside the house. It was much too shrill to have been the granny. Did she have relatives? A grandchild? Why were they screaming? The wolf ran around the house and peered into a window. The view showed a hallway that separated the front of the house from the back. A young girl in a red hooded cloak stood in front of a doorway. She didn't move as she stared at whatever was going on in the other room. Splatters of a darker red stained her clothes and covered her arms. Ben's attuned nose noticed the smell. Metallic. Familiar. Blood. He ran to the next window to see what the girl was staring at. He nearly screamed himself when he saw the carnage. Something stood hunched over old Granny in her bed. Blood stained everything in the room, the quilt, the chest of drawers, the fallen basket, and scattered fruit tarts. The smell was so strong that it nearly made Ben fall backward. He didn't know what the hell was going on, but that child couldn't stay there. Ben couldn't go and get help. Who would listen to him? And even if they did, she could be dead when they got back. He rushed to the front of the house and burst through the door. "Hey!" he called out, bolting for the hall. The kid still hadn't moved, not an inch. She didn't even respond to Ben as he approached. He grabbed her shoulder and turned her to face him. "Kid, you need to get out of here. Go get help." He shoved her aside and darted into the room, not knowing what he would find there. The thing hunched over Granny lifted its head and turned to look at Ben. He could recognize it now. It had the face of the old woodcutter who lived at the far edge of the forest. He often came by to deliver firewood to the old lady as he passed by on his way to town. Ben never wanted to run into this fellow, as his vision was still perfect, and he was never without his axe. Now he stood facing the woodcutter, who had bloody bits of Ben's only friend dangling from his teeth, skin as gray as stone, eyes milky white, and a growl so beastly. Was this even the same man? In a panic, Ben's gaze darted around the room, hoping to find something he could use as a weapon. The woodsman's axe lay on the floor nearby. The woodsman lunged with a guttural cry, mouth wide open. Ben grabbed the axe, sidestepped, and struck the woodsman on the head, knocking him down with an audible crunch as he flew into the hall. In his frantic haste, Ben had grabbed the weapon backward. He hadn't cleaved the woodsman like he expected, but from the sound when he hit, the man had to be dead. To be sure, he prodded the body with the axe. When the woodsman groaned and struggled to all fours, Ben quickly turned to leave, and found the little girl still standing in the hall. "Why are you still here?" he shouted at her. "Run already, get help!" She didn't move. No running away, no flinching, not even a nod to show she heard him. She just stared forward, not at Ben or the woodsman. Something was very wrong with her. The woodsman's head turned toward the girl, and he started to crawl her way, growling as he moved. Without thinking, Ben brought the business end of the axe down on the woodsman's back. Dark red fluid poured like syrup from the wound. Its blood smelled spoiled and foul. Ben dropped the axe and held his nose as he approached the motionless child. "Hey," he spoke softly. "Are you all right?" No response. Ben snapped his fingers a few times, trying to get the kid's attention. Nothing. He brushed away the dark hair covering her eyes. Nothing but a blank stare. Granny had told Ben stories of visits from her granddaughter. This child must have been her. "Do you have a name?" he asked. "Mine's Ben." No answer. The kid must have been in shock after seeing what had become of her grandmother. Who could blame her? "How about Red, then?" Not the most creative, but he needed something to call her until he found help. He took Red in his arms and carried her out of the house. He knew he'd have trouble getting people to help him with the kid, and even more trouble explaining what the hell just happened. If his father heard about this, he would be livid that Ben tried to help. He didn't care about all that now. This kid needed help, and Ben would be damned if he didn't find some for her. "Come on, Red," he spoke softly. "Let's get you safe."